A big boy.
And boy convenience.
Was there one boy?
In criminal investigations, few cases are as harrowing or emotionally charged as those involving children as witnesses or victims. The delicate nature of such interrogations demands a high level of expertise, particularly when it comes to children who may have witnessed or been involved in traumatic events. One such case stands out: the tragic story of a mother's mysterious death and the young child who unknowingly held the key to solving the crime. This story takes us to the case of 3-year-old Jade Scotton, a child whose observations and recounting of the events of that fateful night would ultimately lead investigators to uncover the horrific conspiracy behind her mother's death. Jade's account may seem simple, but it would soon become clear that her words were far more significant than anyone could have imagined. The tragic discovery. On the morning of March 15, 1998, Aletta Scotton, a 28-year-old woman, was found unconscious in her home. The scene was disturbing. She had taken a lethal amount of insulin and methamphetamine. At first glance, it seemed like a tragic overdose. But something didn't sit right. Jade, Aletta's 3-year-old daughter, was the only other person in the house, and her recollections were about to change everything. The local investigators, while familiar with the routine of overdose deaths, quickly realized that this wasn't a simple case. The presence of drugs and insulin could have been enough to explain Aletta's death, but Jade's account would suggest otherwise. The young girl's words were innocent, yet chilling. As the investigators delved deeper into the case, they began to realize the complexity of the situation, slowly uncovering a story that no one, including Jade herself, had fully understood. The unlikely witness. At first, it seemed impossible that a 3-year-old child could offer any useful insight into the events leading to her mother's death. But as detectives and child psychologists know, children are incredibly observant. The way they process trauma and communicate their understanding is different from adults, often presenting challenges in how law enforcement interacts with them. Proper questioning techniques become crucial. Jade's first interrogation was a delicate process. It was evident that the investigators had to be especially careful in how they asked their questions. They couldn't risk intimidating the little girl or leading her into providing answers that weren't genuine. They needed answers that were purely from her own experience and understanding, free from any adult influence. The investigator asked simple, open-ended questions. "Can you tell me what happened to Mommy?" In her childlike innocence, Jade recounted the details of that night with surprising clarity. She talked about a man who came to the house, a man who seemed familiar. He wasn't someone Jade had been told about, but she remembered him distinctly. The way she described him was unsettling. His presence was not one of a stranger, but of someone who had been there before. The investigators were immediately struck by her detailed recollections, but they couldn't be certain. Could a 3-year-old, unprompted, have given such an accurate description of the events? Jade described the man entering the house, a man who seemed to have a quiet, forceful demeanor. She didn't seem scared, but rather puzzled by his actions. Her perception was clearly altered by the traumatic nature of the night. She spoke of a struggle, the noise in the house, the confusion, and the eventual stillness that followed. Jade's words weren't perfect, and at times, they didn't make sense. However, certain key details, about a person, a struggle, and something about the house that wasn't quite right, stood out to the investigators. The breakthrough. It took only a few more hours of questioning for the investigators to make an astonishing breakthrough. When they asked Jade about what happened after she woke up, she seemed to focus on one specific moment, something that had always been present in the house but was now missing. "Mommy's bed wasn't where it usually was," she said. This simple statement would turn out to be incredibly important. It suggested that Aletta had been moved or placed somewhere after her collapse, which was unusual for someone who had supposedly overdosed. As more details emerged, the investigators started to connect the dots. Jade's mother had indeed been moved. She hadn't just collapsed. She had been deliberately placed on the floor in a way that suggested the death wasn't accidental. The next logical step was to probe deeper into the circumstances surrounding Aletta's death. Who had been in the house that night? Who knew how to manipulate the insulin and methamphetamine to make it look like an overdose? The investigation unfolds. As investigators dug deeper into the life of Aletta Scotton, they discovered a complicated, emotional backstory. Aletta had recently gone through a turbulent breakup with her boyfriend and had been raising Jade on her own. In her struggle to rebuild her life, she had turned to support from friends and family, yet there were still unresolved tensions in her past relationships, notably with her ex-husband and his new girlfriend, Vicki Arlene Jensen. Vicki, as it turned out, had a strong motive. She had been jealous of Aletta's relationship with her ex-husband and had hired a group of teenagers to kill Aletta and stage it as an overdose. The evidence against her was mounting, but it wasn't until Jade's statements were carefully analyzed that investigators could finally piece together the full story. It became clear that Vicki had orchestrated the entire plot to eliminate her perceived rival. What Jade had unknowingly uncovered through her innocent recounting of events was a tale of revenge, jealousy, and manipulation. The three teenagers who had been hired to carry out the crime had followed the orders of someone who was deeply obsessed with her past relationships, willing to go to any lengths to get rid of the woman who stood in her way. The true Mindhunter. This case is not just about a child's ability to witness and communicate the truth. It's about the skill of the investigator who knows how to draw out those critical details from a young, traumatized witness without causing further distress. It's also about recognizing the signs of something much deeper, something hidden behind the facade of a simple domestic dispute or personal vendetta. The real Mindhunter in this case wasn't just the criminal mastermind orchestrating the murder, but the investigator who knew how to question a young child and bring out the truth. This case highlights the importance of sensitivity, patience, and a profound understanding of child psychology in criminal investigations. If the police officer had been less skilled or more impatient, Jade's small but crucial observations might have gone unnoticed. Instead, they were carefully nurtured and guided to unravel the truth. Jade Scotton, the 3-year-old girl, unknowingly became a hero in the investigation of her mother's death. Her words, though simple and innocent, held the power to unlock a dark and twisted conspiracy, leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for her mother's murder. The search for the truth. The case of Jade Scotton's mother, Aletta, highlights the delicate balance required when interrogating children, especially when they are the victims or witnesses to traumatic events. The way children process trauma can vary drastically from adults, and when children are called upon to recall painful memories, their accounts may be fragmented, unclear, or influenced by their limited understanding of complex situations. In Jade's case, her words didn't always align with reality, yet they painted a chilling picture of the events leading up to her mother's death. It is not uncommon for children to give partial or distorted recollections due to the way they interpret the world around them. Their lack of vocabulary, emotional complexity, and the development of their memories can all contribute to unclear statements. However, this doesn't mean that what children say should be dismissed. Often, their words contain more truth than anyone initially believes. The role of the investigator, particularly one trained in dealing with children, is to extract these critical truths while ensuring the child's emotional and mental well-being. For investigators, one of the key challenges in such cases is determining what is real and what is a product of a child's imagination or fear. This is especially true when the child is very young, as Jade was in this case. Her ability to describe the scene of her mother's death in detail suggested that Jade had witnessed more than she could fully comprehend. The investigators faced the daunting task of distinguishing between a child's vivid imagination and the harsh reality of a crime scene that no child should ever witness. Building trust. One of the critical steps in this case was how the investigators gained Jade's trust. Children often shut down when faced with trauma or interrogation, particularly if they feel threatened or unsafe. It's essential to approach them with empathy, patience, and an understanding of their emotional state. Dr. Burgess, a renowned expert in child trauma and a consultant for the FBI, had dealt with similar cases in the past, where a victim's ability to recall events had been crucial to solving the case. Dr. Burgess' technique was simple yet profound, building trust and using non-threatening methods to help the child feel comfortable. In Jade's case, the investigators didn't press her for answers too quickly. Instead, they let her speak at her own pace, encouraging her to share what she could. They didn't rush her or make her feel like she was in any way at fault for what had happened. When a child feels safe, they are more likely to open up, and this is especially important in situations where the child has witnessed something as traumatic as the murder of their mother. Through gentle questioning, Jade began to offer more details. She described a man she had seen entering the house, someone who she initially seemed to recognize but couldn't place. As the questioning continued, investigators noticed that Jade's recollections became more consistent. She remembered the sound of the door opening, the footsteps in the house, and the unfamiliar man. These weren't simply the ramblings of a frightened child. They were key details that suggested the involvement of someone close to her mother's life. The pieces of the puzzle. As the investigation deepened, Jade's account became more focused, and the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Jade described the events in ways that the adults in her life couldn't fully comprehend. While the police had initially suspected an overdose, Jade's recollections were starting to lead them toward a far darker conclusion. The description of the man she had seen in the house was eerily consistent with someone in Aletta's life, someone who would have known her routine, the layout of her home, and possibly even her vulnerabilities. At the same time, investigators were carefully analyzing the circumstances of Aletta's death. The presence of insulin and methamphetamine suggested an overdose, but Jade's testimony pointed to a deliberate, premeditated crime. The fact that Aletta had been moved from one location in the house to another, the lack of defensive wounds, and the manner in which she had been drugged all pointed to a different kind of murder, a cold, calculated execution rather than a tragic mistake. The breakthrough in this case didn't come from forensic evidence or witness testimony. It came from Jade's innocent recounting of the night. Though she couldn't understand the gravity of the situation, her ability to provide details about the man in the house, the chaos that followed, and the overall atmosphere of the night were the missing pieces investigators needed to piece together the full picture. The role of child psychologists. One of the most important factors in this case was the involvement of child psychologists who helped guide the interrogation process. These professionals knew the challenges investigators faced in getting children to talk and provided valuable insight into how best to approach the situation. Dr. Burgess, who had been a pioneer in the field of victim psychology, had worked with children in trauma situations before. Her expertise in understanding how children process trauma and express themselves was crucial to unlocking the details that would ultimately solve the case. The role of a child psychologist in criminal investigations cannot be overstated. Children are vulnerable and may not fully understand the consequences of what they say, especially if they've been exposed to trauma. It's the job of trained professionals to ensure that the child is not manipulated or forced into recalling memories that may not be accurate. Dr. Burgess' work, particularly her non-intrusive methods, was instrumental in helping Jade open up without pushing her too hard. The murder plot unfolds. Months passed, and as the investigation moved forward, Jade's testimony became a cornerstone of the case. While investigators had initially been unsure of what had transpired in Aletta's home that night, they now knew that Aletta's death was no accident. It wasn't a simple overdose. It was a cold-blooded murder orchestrated by someone who had been close to her. The breakthrough came when it was revealed that Vicki Arlene Jensen, Aletta's ex-husband's new girlfriend, had hired 3 teenagers to kill Aletta. Vicki's motive was jealousy. She couldn't stand the idea of Aletta being with her ex-husband and was determined to eliminate her. The teenagers, who were hired by Vicki, carried out the murder, and Vicki's jealousy and manipulation had led to the death of Aletta Scotton. The investigation revealed the chilling truth. Vicki had been the mastermind behind the entire plot. She had been living in the shadows, secretly plotting the murder of a woman who had once been a threat to her own happiness. The investigation into the teenagers, who had been hired to do the job, uncovered their connection to Vicki, and it became clear that this wasn't just a random crime. It was a targeted hit fueled by revenge and rage. The courage of a child. Jade Scotton, with her innocent recollections and courageous honesty, had solved her mother's murder. Her words, though spoken through the lens of a child's understanding, had brought justice to her mother. Jade's testimony wasn't just important, it was the key to understanding the complex dynamics that led to Aletta's death. Without Jade, the case may have remained a mystery, one that no adult could have unraveled on their own. Her bravery in recounting what she saw that night, even though she couldn't fully comprehend the implications of her words, was an example of how the innocence and honesty of a child can sometimes be more revealing than the actions of adults. Jade had been through something no child should ever experience, but her ability to speak out helped uncover the truth and bring closure to a grieving family. The impact of the investigation. The case of Jade Scotton's mother serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of how investigators approach interrogating children. It's easy to overlook the potential of a young child's testimony, but their ability to recall details, even when they are still too young to fully understand them, can provide crucial leads in solving cases. It also underscores the importance of trauma-informed interrogation techniques that prioritize the emotional and psychological well-being of the child. In this case, Jade's testimony, combined with the expertise of child psychologists and investigators, led to the eventual conviction of those responsible for Aletta's death. It also served as a wake-up call for law enforcement, emphasizing the need for specialized training in dealing with young witnesses and victims. While Jade's journey through this traumatic experience was undoubtedly difficult, Her strength and her role in helping solve the case became a testament to the resilience of children and the power of their voices in the pursuit of justice. The aftermath. The case of Jade Scotton's mother, Aletta, was ultimately resolved through the courage and memory of a 3-year-old girl. In many ways, the outcome of the investigation depended on the delicate balance of a trauma-informed approach to the interrogation of a child. While the physical evidence and adult testimonies painted a picture of the crime scene, it was Jade's words that became the cornerstone for solving the case. Investigators learned the hard way that sometimes the most important witnesses aren't always the ones with the most information, but those who hold the purest form of honesty and vulnerability. Following the investigation, the truth about Aletta's death unraveled. Vicki Arlene Jensen, motivated by jealousy and a deep-rooted desire for revenge, masterminded a plot to murder Aletta Scotton. Vicki had a deep resentment for Aletta, stemming from the romantic relationships that had caused a fracture between Aletta and her ex-husband. Her intense feelings of jealousy had festered, and in her mind, the only way to eliminate the competition was to take matters into her own hands. Vicki's plan was chillingly calculated. She enlisted the help of 3 teenagers, all of whom were promised money in exchange for carrying out the murder. These teenagers, manipulated by Vicki's promises, carried out the violent act, and Aletta was killed in her own home. Despite the fact that Vicki had been instrumental in orchestrating the murder, she managed to keep her involvement hidden for months. The investigators, however, were able to unravel the plot through various pieces of evidence, one of the most critical being Jade's recollections. What started as a simple interview with a frightened child blossomed into a breakthrough that ultimately led to the uncovering of the crime's true nature. Jade, in her innocence, had witnessed the events leading up to the tragedy, and her recollections provided investigators with the missing pieces to put everything together. The role of psychology in investigations. This case further underscores the importance of psychology in criminal investigations, particularly when dealing with children. Children, especially those who have experienced trauma, process and express their emotions in ways that adults may not fully understand. For investigators who are not trained in child psychology, it can be easy to dismiss a child's testimony as unreliable or confused. But this case is a testament to the fact that children often hold the key to understanding complex situations, even when their recollections may seem fragmented or unclear. In Jade's case, her responses to the investigators' questions were at first unclear. She was a child, and her understanding of the world around her was limited. But as the investigators took a patient, trauma-informed approach, Jade began to piece together the events she had witnessed, and her testimony evolved into a crucial part of the investigation. Dr. Burgess, a psychologist who had been a key consultant to the FBI, had worked with many child victims and witnesses. Her methods, which involved non-threatening and empathetic questioning, allowed children to feel safe enough to open up. By gently guiding Jade through the recollection of events, the investigators were able to help her recall moments that may have otherwise been lost. Dr. Burgess' work with Opal in the case of Melissa Ackerman is another example of how her psychological expertise helped to unlock the truth behind traumatic events. By allowing the victims to express themselves in a safe and nurturing environment, Dr. Burgess and her team were able to extract key details that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. The importance of child witnesses in criminal justice. Jade's testimony ultimately led to the conviction of Vicki Arlene Jensen and the teenagers she had hired to murder Aletta. The justice system had relied on Jade's words, and it was a reminder that child witnesses are not to be overlooked or underestimated. In criminal justice, the value of a child's testimony cannot be measured simply by their age or their ability to articulate details perfectly. Instead, the focus should be on creating an environment where children feel safe enough to tell their stories in their own words. The trial against Vicki Arlene Jensen and the teenagers revealed the true horror of the crime and the lengths to which jealousy and vengeance can drive individuals. Vicki's actions were those of a woman consumed by her emotions, but ultimately, her inability to conceal her guilt led to her downfall. The case was a stark reminder of the psychological toll that domestic conflicts and broken relationships can have, especially when they involve children. But Jade's courage, her unrelenting memory, and her willingness to recount the horrifying events in a way that no adult could fully comprehend were what ultimately brought justice for Aletta. Jade, through her innocence, was able to do something that no adult could have done: solve her mother's murder. Child witnesses in the broader context of crime. While Jade's case is an exceptional one, it sheds light on a broader issue that often goes unaddressed in the criminal justice system: the treatment of child witnesses and victims. The way children are questioned, their emotional state during an interrogation, and the psychological impact of revisiting traumatic memories all play crucial roles in the outcomes of investigations. One of the most important aspects of interrogating children in criminal cases is ensuring that they are not re-traumatized in the process. Children are vulnerable, and their minds are not fully developed to handle the complexity of criminal investigations. Without proper guidance and support, a child may struggle to recall details or may even suppress memories in an attempt to protect themselves from emotional distress. For investigators, it is essential to recognize that children may not always present information in a linear or structured manner. Children may speak in fragmented sentences, mix up events, or struggle to articulate what happened. But that doesn't mean their testimony is any less valuable. With the right support, children can provide crucial details that can make all the difference in solving a case. Moving forward, the case of Jade Scotton and her mother's murder is a tragic yet illuminating example of how children can be key witnesses in the criminal justice system. By recognizing the unique challenges that child witnesses face, investigators and law enforcement can better understand how to approach these cases. In the past, there may have been a tendency to underestimate the importance of a child's voice in solving crimes. But cases like Jade's show that children can provide critical insights into events that adults may not be able to fully comprehend. While Jade's involvement in the investigation ultimately led to justice for her mother, her case also serves as a reminder of the importance of empathy, patience, and expertise when dealing with children in criminal investigations. If investigators and law enforcement professionals can approach child witnesses with the understanding and care they need, the justice system can work more effectively to bring perpetrators to justice and provide closure for victims and their families. As Jade continues to grow and heal from the traumatic events she witnessed, she will likely never fully understand the impact her words had on the investigation. But what she did for her mother's case was nothing short of extraordinary. Through her courage, Jade not only brought justice for her mother, but also provided a valuable lesson in the power of child witnesses in the pursuit of truth. In the future, investigators should continue to learn from cases like Jade's, using these lessons to guide their interactions with young victims and witnesses. The ultimate goal should always be to uncover the truth, support the emotional well-being of children, and ensure that justice is served for the victims who may not have a voice of their own. The final word. Jade Scotton's journey through this tragic chapter of her life was undoubtedly difficult. But through her strength and the support of investigators who understood the importance of her testimony, she became a crucial part of solving her mother's murder. In doing so, she provided an invaluable lesson for law enforcement everywhere. That sometimes, the smallest voices can carry the most powerful truths. The case of Jade's mother is a testament to the resilience of children and the critical role they can play in solving crimes. The story of Jade Scotton will live on as an example of what can be accomplished when we approach children with the respect, care, and attention they deserve in the pursuit of justice.